This week, Kumar and I discuss Mitsuru Adachi's Cross Game, the baseball manga for people who don't care about baseball. We look at the first volume of the omnibus edition. As always, a reminder that you can support the podcast by pledging a few bucks a month at patreon.com/deconcomics. At $4 a month, you can hear our monthly podcast on Jim Starlin's Captain Marvel run. Or if you'd rather give a one-time donation, you can do so via PayPal by sending it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support. This is Tim.
And this is Kumar.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Kumar in Melbourne. Hello.
Hello.
So, as we mentioned before, we're kind of putting Berserk on the back burner for an indeterminate amount of time. I do want to keep reading it.
Yes.
I haven't gotten to it yet because I've been too busy with other stuff, but we'll see if we talk about it again or not. It might depend on my reading it and seeing if it improves or not. It kind of hit a bad spot there. Mm-hmm. So instead, we're talking about a different Japanese comic.
Completely different. So different.
Oh, yeah, the polar opposite of Berserk. Cross Game by Mitsuru Adachi, a Shonen Sunday comic that's published in English by Viz. And we're talking today about the first volume of the Omnibus, which contains the first three regular volumes.
Yeah.
And this started in 2005.
Yeah, the English releases were 2010, and I think there were 17 volumes total in Japanese and 8 omnibuses total in English. The other ones have 2 volumes, not 3. So from 2 to 7, yeah.
So I was wondering why it was called this, and I did some Googling around, and I found somebody on Stack Exchange had written that it was a play on Close Game.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right.
A kind of a pun, sort of.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, because, I mean, other people were trying to figure it out, and like, well, in the clover, there's like a cross. I'm like, no, I don't think so. Because, the clover is four-leaf clover is kind of an important bit of this. And shows up in, like, title pages and stuff quite a bit. Yeah, so we're going to talk about what happens in this first omnibus volume. And we discussed whether we should say there was a spoiler, but it's kind of built around this event that happens
at the end of
early on.
Volume 1, which if you're reading in English is like a third of the way through the first volume. So it's not even
omnibus.
Yeah, the first omnibus, right?
Okay. So just kind of set it up. So the main character.
Before we get into the main characters and all that stuff, I do want to talk about how I came upon this book.
Okay.
And why I've been pushing to get it on the podcast for 10 years now. And it's kind of been not put on because it's so long. It's a very fast read, I think, but it is very, I mean, it's these 8 omnibuses long. So I picked up Volume 3 randomly out of a discount manga bin at a local comic shop. I just was flipping through that box to see what was in there for cheap. It was like, $5 or whatever. And this was in there. Now, I knew Mitsuru Adachi by name because his previous series, Touch, from the 80s, was really famous. And turns up on Japanese manga list is like one of the greatest manga of all time. It's never been released in English. I don't know why Cross Game came out in English, but Touch did not, because Touch is more famous. But I picked this up randomly. I took it up to the counter. The guy tried to charge me full price cover. I was like, I got this at a discount bin. That comic shop is no more, by the way. They closed shortly afterwards. But I'd heard of Touch, so I bought this. But I mean, Tim asked me how much I care about baseball.
How much do you care about baseball?
I could not give a rat's butt about baseball, Tim. I don't know anything. I know like 1 or 2 or 3 terms that I remember from elementary school gym class lessons about baseball. I really couldn't care less about it. But I read this volume, Omnibus number 3, and I was like, holy cow, what is this? And then sought out the other volumes. I have them all in hardcover. Not hardcover, but hard copies. I do believe they are available digitally as well from Viz now. But I sought them out. I just was like, this is not like anything I'd ever read elsewhere. And I actually feel like, I want to say, the reason I'm saying this is because this is a quote-unquote baseball manga or a sports manga, and it has some of the trappings, I think, of sports manga, but I don't think you really need to know anything about baseball to read this manga. There's some kind of terminology and stuff, but it doesn't matter. You just kind of flow past it. There's all the interrelationship kind of stuff that I feel is way more important than any of the baseball stuff. But I also want to say that as far as the baseball in this manga goes, I think it's way more exciting than real baseball. Any real baseball that I've seen. Where you're seeing guys standing around, scratching their crotches, spitting tobacco. They're batting. Why are they batting their bat against their shoes for some reason? I don't know what's going on. A lot of standing around, hours and hours. By the way, this, never mind cricket, which people have tried to introduce me to while I've been living in Australia, and it's literally like 3-4 days for a game of cricket before you get the final result. Baseball, to me, these are just like molasses sports. Baseball is very exciting in this manga. Really dynamic, explosive, way better than real baseball. So I just want to get that out at the start, because these things were all amazing to me, and it's amazing to me that I really love this manga, and this is probably my third time reading it. I'm amazed that I love this manga this much. It surprises me. Well, there's been several sports manga. Ping Pong, which is another one we covered on the show. I don't know how far outside the norm of other sports manga these are, or how much more exceptional like Cross Game is than other baseball manga. In my heart, it's probably a lot better than other baseball manga, I have to imagine, because Adachi is known to be like, this is his gig. But I guess it's about all this around. Another one is like Real, which was the baseball wheelchair basketball manga that I talked about with my brother on the show many years ago, which is like more about all the other stuff that's around it, that the games become not as important. I mean, manga seems to be able to distill sports into like a really dramatic, here's the most important stuff kind of way, so you don't have to sit around waiting for stuff to happen.
Right.
Anyway,
yeah, timeouts are not interesting manga.
Exactly. You don't have to sit through the commercial breaks or anything like that. And also, right. I mean, this is baseball at a high school level. By the time you get to the third part of this first omnibus, these are kids playing baseball. We'll talk about the level of seriousness when we get to the high school stuff. But before that, it's junior high kids playing baseball and elementary school kids playing baseball. So it's just like neighborhood sports. So there's not any kind of ridiculous advertising kind of component. Like I was trying to get around to the point of, you don't have to sit through commercials, as you would watching a sports game. This is not professional sports, so that's kind of that whole world of it is not part of it at this stage anyway. So I just want to get all that out before we get to the plot.
Okay.
Which we can get to, because I think the plot is, I don't know how important aspects of the plot are. I don't think it's the best thing about it. Let's say we'll put it that way.
Okay.
As we go through it.
Okay. Right. So I wanted to set it up. So Ko Kitamura is a boy whose family runs a sporting goods shop. And their family knows the Tsukishima family, where the mother has died before the comic starts. And that's the father and 4 daughters. Ichio, Wakaba, Aoba, and Momiji.
Yeah. With a huge age range, because Ichio is in grade 10 at the start, and Momiji is in
Momiji is like in kindergarten at the beginning. Yeah. And yet Wakaba and Aoba are only a year apart. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. And the mom died at 41. We're told this fact. Her presence kind of haunts the series a little bit in the early volume, but that changes, of course, at the end of this first part. But Yeah, so they live just kind of like, they're practically like living at each other's houses. They're constantly over making deliveries or whatever because the Kitamuras have the sports store, so he's delivering baseballs to the batting center.
Right. Tsukishimas have a batting center and also a coffee shop called Clover.
Yes.
And so that's the first thing that is discussed in the manga, and like why Clover is called what it is in Japanese, the kind of little bit of the history of it.
And Wakaba, the daughter Wakaba, is the same age to the day as Ko. Mm-hmm. They're both in grade 5 at the start of the manga.
Mm-hmm. And she's really sweet on him, and he admits to us that she's the cutest girl in their grade.
Mm. And it's a kind of puppy love.
Lots of guys are crushing on her.
Yes. There's a kind of puppy love thing going on here where she kind of kisses him on the cheek whenever she says goodbye to him. She kind of treats him as a boyfriend. At one stage, because she doesn't like the birthday present he buys her when they turn 11, she makes a list of every birthday, what present to buy her every year until she's 18. And the 18th birthday is an engagement ring. So she's got this kind of innocent kind of crush where she's like kind of fantasizing. At one point they're walking through the neighborhood and they see a wedding happening, and there's some kind of foreshadowing that their future is together. He's not like, he doesn't protest this idea at all. He's just kind of going along with it. But he's over there batting every day just because he's making deliveries. So the dad, Tsukishima, the father, allows him to use the batting cages for free. So he's just in there practicing like crazy, and he has no interest in baseball.
We find out later why that is, or why he kind of got turned off on baseball. And yet he's practiced batting, and he's gotten really good at it.
Yeah. And then he practices pitching or playing catch with Momiji, the youngest one, the kindergartner. So he kind of gets good at throwing as well.
Mm-hmm. I want sidebar. Do batting centers exist in any other country besides Japan?
They must, because they have surely they have the ball, like the automatic ball machine. They have them for tennis. They must have them for baseball.
I think pros use them to practice, but I don't know if in America, I never saw a business where you could go to practice your batting.
Well, they have practice golf swing places, right? Because I see them all over. I see them here at several places. They have giant nets. They're usually by the highway, so when you drive past, you see this net that's like 40 feet high so that your car doesn't get beamed by a golf ball.
Right. Japan has those too, of course.
Yeah,
but
so maybe there must be something similar.
The U.S.
But I will say, to this comic's credit, you never question what this thing is. Like, you understand completely. All this, like all the baseball stuff in here that's like this alien world for me, I just didn't have any trouble with it. You know what I mean? Like, there's such clarity about it.
And, you can see what it's kind of setting up in terms of baseball, and they're talking about the Koshien tournament. Although, in a way that I was wondering if readers not familiar with Japan would figure that out right away.
This maybe is the most culturally specific thing about it, is Koshien. Koshien, if anybody says Koshien is the arena where they have the high school baseball tournament, the big one. So I guess high school baseball is a really big deal in Japan, especially the Koshien tournament, those final matches. It's almost on the. I was trying to think, what's the equivalent? Is it like maybe in the U.S. like college level football or basketball is pretty like.
Yeah, I mean it's almost on a level with like March Madness or something. I don't know that there might be betting on it. I don't know, but anyway, I think it gets similar amounts of attention anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And I remember I had a girlfriend in Japan, and for some reason it came up, and she said, I really hate Koshien, and she was talking about the pressure that parents put on their kids, and I immediately understood what she meant. Like, you could get a sense of, parents must put their kids through hell, or the schools or the coaches or whatever, to get them to this tournament, which is just a sports tournament, really, in the end, right? So I got a sense of what she meant by that when she talked about the pressure on the kids.
Yeah. I was also wondering if readers, like non-Japanese readers, would understand why the bats make a clang sound. Because in America, you don't usually encounter metal bats. They're usually not allowed, I think, even at the high school level.
Okay.
But Japanese high school, they always use these metal bats that aluminum, go clang when you hit the ball.
Yeah, right. Okay. I didn't even put that together.
But yeah, you never hear that clang in American baseball at any level, I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least not when I lived in America. Yeah, so you might have told me something about this before. Mm. I mean, maybe like a year ago when we started doing Berserk. Mm. But I didn't really remember what you told me. And so I'm reading part 1, and it's kind of, serene. I was looking for the right word.
Yeah.
Kind of feeling. And,
there's a tranquility. There's a tranquility. There's a peacefulness about it.
Yeah, it's a good word.
Yeah.
And they're playing baseball, and we got this little puppy love.
They're in this kind of country town, it seems like, and everything's really sweet. Mm-hmm. He draws Wakaba so cute. Like, I was amazed, and I'm looking at these drawings. He has a very cartoonish style for the people. I think he puts his assistants through absolute hell drawing the environments and cars and things because they're absolutely photorealistic. I
wanted to ask you about that. Yeah. Because that's not unique to this manga, but those environmental shots are really photorealistic. Yeah. And do they use photos or how do they do those?
Well, I'm not sure, but I remember I used to buy Japanese artist books in Japan. They would have it's not like a swipe file, but it's like here's your backgrounds and stuff. You could almost cut those out and put them in the back of your manga and then draw your character over top. Like there was just line drawings, photorealistic line drawings of environments and stuff. These kind of artist aids. So yeah, I have to imagine he gets photos of places. Sometimes it's almost the same establishing shots of the Clover Cafe or the sporting goods store or things like that. But I have to assume that he hands this stuff off to his assistants and is like, here you go. Here's your work for the next 16 hours. Trace over this. Make it look really real. But you've got a bit of I think Scott McCloud called this masking in Understanding Comics. He's talking specifically about Tintin, where you have a super realistic background and a very cartoonish character, which makes it easier to relate to. But looking at Wakaba specifically, her face is 6 lines. 2 eyebrows, 2 lines for the eyes often, 1 line for the nose, 1 line for the mouth. And he just draws these amazing characters. The body language and gestures are really somehow very realistic in this, despite how simplified the figures are. And there's a pretty big cast of characters. But he has ways of very cartoonishly distinguishing them. Like one guy, this big guy, I think it's Akaishi, has the monobrow or things like that. You don't really have trouble distinguishing them. Yeah. But yes, very serene, pastoral.
Serene, tranquil. And then Wakaba goes off to swimming camp. And she's talking about she's going to be gone for 2 days and she'll come back. And then the day after that, she and Ko are going to go to the summer festival.
Yes.
And this is handled so subtly.
Yeah.
The first indication that something is wrong is that Ko and his mom notice that the batting center and the cafe are closed, and it's not their usual day to be closed. Mm-hmm. And a few pages later, we see Ko's dad getting a phone call, and he looks shocked.
Yeah.
And then.
But it's just one panel of him with his eyes wide open. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Ko is watching the Koshien tournament, of all things. Mm-hmm. And there's a break in the action with a little short news report, and it says that Wakaba died in a swimming accident. She was trying to rescue a younger kid who had gone out too deep, and she drowned herself. And Ko's reaction is really understate. You're not even quite sure if he heard the news there.
Yeah.
I mean, he's drinking milk out of the carton as he often does.
Yes.
And there's not a big reaction. And he's still watching the tournament, and then his parents come in, and they're dressed for going to the funeral.
He has a very curious look on his face when he hears the news. I think he is processing it and kind of doesn't want to believe it. And because we actually, he doesn't grieve until like the chapter after the funeral, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he finally kind of realizes what he needs to do.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this came totally out of nowhere the first time I read it. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And so when I reread it, and I knew what to look for, and I was seeing how Adachi had set up so many things ahead of time, and like for maximum tear jerkiness.
Yeah, they see the wedding. She's like, someday I'm gonna get married. She gives him the list of all the birthday presents she wants. Before she leaves, they have some fireworks. They set up some fireworks outside their house. So she gets this like beautiful kind of private summer festival at their own house.
And she wants to borrow his baseball cap, and so she's wearing the cap. And then after she's gone, her dad gives it back to Ko in like a silent scene.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of build up there. Interesting thing for me was I read Omnibus number 3 first. And the thing is, so I knew that somebody had died in an earlier volume. I'd heard about this, but I didn't really realize the full depth of it. But that death haunts every page, really after it in some way. Because the thing about him drinking the milk, and he starts lifting weights when he's in grade 5. He's trying to toughen himself up. This is all to become like a kind of baseball player, to become what she's hoping he'll go to Koshien. To reach the top, and so that's all part of his. When we get the jump cut, which we'll talk about, he's still working out. He's still drinking the milk. That's all because of her, right? And the other thing that we haven't talked about is her sister Aoba, who is 1 year younger than them, is annoyed by. She finds Ko annoying. This annoying kid that her sister hangs out with, probably because he's stealing her time. But he's always kind of hanging around at the batting center, getting free access to the batting cage because of the dad or whatever. So she thinks he's kind of a nuisance. And you think that's going to be the nature of the whole relationship for the next 17 volumes. No, this immediately gets turned on its head. She has this dream. Alba says, as she's 9 years old, she says, well, I want to marry a man who can pitch 100 miles an hour. She makes this weird kid statement, right, about who she's going to marry. And Wakaba tells her, well, someday Ko might pitch 100 miles an hour, but please don't take him from me, right?
Yeah, I mean, if Ko works at it, he can be the best pitcher in Japan.
Yeah.
And Aoba, as we get through the first omnibus volume, she's kind of seeing that too, and even having a dream about it.
Yeah.
But she still acts irritated towards Ko much of the time.
Yes.
And I feel like part of that is just her grieving.
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. She's the one who... We see two people crying because there's a very muted reaction to her death. And even Momiji, the little girl... it's really, I don't know if it's a mistake on Adachi's part, but you really are forced to sit and think about, like, okay, we see the funeral scene. None of the daughters are crying at the funeral, and they've lost their mother. I don't know, could have been in the last, well, since this 5-year-old was born, right? So within the last 5 years, the mother has died. So what are they thinking about the death of this sister? It's very hard to process, to understand as a reader, but we see... Ko finally breaks down and cries. Akaishi cries, who's the kid that had a crush on her.
Yeah, he sees Akaishi. Now, this was a scene I thought, it works in a Japanese context, that Akaishi is outside the Tsukishima's house bowing and crying.
Yeah.
I feel like if it happened in America, somebody'd call the cops.
Yes.
But in Japan, it works.
Yes. And we see Aoba, who's crying as she's batting. This is her way of processing the grief, is to just hit balls against the cage, like, really hard. Yeah, so that's how she processes that. But in that funeral scene, we don't really know how they think about it. The other thing about Alba is she's a bit of a tomboy, right? And she's a super pitcher. She has which is a bit, I guess maybe this is the most sports manga tropey kind of thing about the series, is that Ko is an awesome pitcher and an awesome batter, but he doesn't play baseball for whatever reasons. And meanwhile, she's also an awesome pitcher. Yes, she's an awesome pitcher. That's right. So we just have these three people who are or two people who are like naturally born athletes in this like small town somewhere. Is it feasible? Maybe not. But you know, that's what we're here for. It's a manga, right? Where you can just fudge reality a little bit. So this person is conveniently an awesome pitcher and an awesome batter. But I guess somebody has to be, because those are the people that get to Koshien.
Right. You don't have a bunch of lousy baseball players and then set them up to go to Koshien in the future. That doesn't work. More on Cross Game coming up. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon. The link is now updated, so if you tried this before and ran into problems, the problems have been fixed. Be sure to bookmark the link for future purchases. Our cut of the proceeds helps keep Deconstructing Comics afloat. We really appreciate your support.
Who's Who, the definitive podcast of the DC Universe.
Spanning from the first issue of Who's Who in 1985 all the way through the loose leaf edition.
Including all the updates, the spin-offs, custom Who's Who pages for forgotten characters, and tons of in-depth character spotlights.
Entries span from the golden age of DC
and into the extreme 1990s.
Covering characters such as Superman by Kurt Swan and John Byrne.
The Justice League by Kevin Maguire.
Batman by Dick Giordano.
The New Titans by Tom Grummett.
Wonder Woman by George Perez.
The Legion of Superheroes by Keith Giffen.
The Flash by Carmine Infantino.
Lobo by Simon Bisley.
The All-Star Squadron by Jerry Ordway.
Firestorm by Al Milgrom.
Aquaman by Chuck Patton.
So many entries talking about Ian Karkull.
The Forever People again, and again, and again.
And hundreds of other characters found in Who's Who, the definitive podcast of the DC Universe.
Available wherever you find podcasts and at fireandwaterpodcast.com.
Nuclear Man, Batman, Hawkman, 2D Man, and Hour Man. Who are all these people, man? They're all part of the DC Who's Who.
So after that first, not the omnibus, but the first volume, like the normal size volume, the first part, then they jump ahead 4 years.
That's right.
And even the chapter numbering starts over. It's part 2 now.
Yeah.
Which runs for much of the series. But I was kind of confused because now we're in regular volume 2, chapter 1 again, but then the third volume, we're continuing that numbering, chapter 11. Like, what's going on? Did Viz make an error? But no, that's how it was set up. I had trouble keeping many notes after that because I kept feeling like Alba's death, that's what this is about, and everything else just seemed kind of inconsequential.
Yes, you're right.
That.
You are so right. You're hit like a train by this death, and they're like, "What? We have to keep going?" And I can get the sense that if you're reading this in serialization or even buying the volumes in Japan, you would maybe have bought volume 1 and you're like, okay, I have to go to the shops and buy volume 2. Or I don't know if there was a gap in publishing, but you'd at least have to wait a week or a month between Alba's death and the grieving and then this 4-year gap. But if you're reading it in this omnibus version, the English version, you got to keep rolling on. And then there's like more plot and you're like, wait a second, Wakaba is dead. Like, why are we talking about that?
Well, the first time I read it, I didn't even compute that 4-year gap.
Yeah.
I felt like it was like a few days later, and this pall was hanging over everything. Right. But yeah, the second time, now he's in ninth grade. Okay,
yeah.
So it's been a while, but of course it still comes up now and then.
Yes,
what Alba said this, or it comes out that this on the same day that she went to swimming camp. she had told, I think it was Akaishi, because his parents have a liquor store.
Yeah.
And he was making a delivery, and she said something to him like she predicted that Ko would go to Koshien in the future, right? And so we've got this kind of prediction there that carries a lot of weight, and especially in a sports manga, because you figure that's what's going to happen.
Yes, but we do have a bit of a twist because Aoba's the wild card in here, almost literally, because she's a girl. She's not allowed on the team. So there's a question of how is she going to be at Koshien, or what's her role going to be in this? Are we going to have a fudging of reality here, or what's going to happen?
And then we get all this political stuff with the coach and the vice principal, and they've recruited this like high-powered coach who has recruited some like
ringers,
extra good ringers from around the country to come in there and play, and they're on a scholarship, and they're even considered so untouchable that if they walk in late to class, the teacher sees scholarship. Okay, never mind.
They sleep in class. They don't do their work, but they have the teachers has the roll call list, and there's a mark next to their name that says scholarship, so they don't punish them in any way. They're just there to win for the school, a bit like university level basketball or football.
So the principal is out sick for some time.
That's right.
And the vice principal is filling in for him, although he's expecting that the principal is going to retire or die or something, and he'll become principal.
Yeah, and this is the thing, is the school didn't care about Koshien before. They were just a normal school, but now this interim principal is like, his ambition is, I want to get this school to Koshien.
Yeah, this is important for recruiting.
Yeah,
for our school to get famous through being in the Koshien tournament.
Yeah. So all these ringers come in, and because of that, then by the way, there's time jumps here happening, because not only do we get 9th grade, then we get up to like 10th grade when Ko enters high school. But that's a key branching point, because he's in high school. Aoba's still back in junior high at this stage, because she's 1 year younger than him. So once this new coach comes in, he's this guy who's famous for having gotten teams to Koshien. He's done it several times, got to the semifinals or whatever. 9 times.
Won a tournament once.
Yeah. One time, there's a rumor about him that apparently at one stage, all the best players, the grade 12s, graduated, and he didn't want to coach the team anymore.
From a different school, yeah.
Yeah, so he encouraged the students to do some bullying, and then he anonymously tipped the school off about it. So
then they were disqualified from playing in future tournaments.
Yeah, I was like, well, I don't quite get how this scheme worked, and also if the tip was anonymous, how did people find out about it? I don't know, but anyway, it's just a rumor.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how they knew it was him if it was anonymous.
It's just a rumor anyway, so we're not sure if that's all true. But this guy's a real, kind of hard-edged coach type, really cruel, kind of. But he basically splits the team. The Seishu High School? But he splits them into two, into a varsity team and a kind of farm team, which are called the portables team, because he says he's not going to use them as a farm. He's not going to take any talent from him. He doesn't care about them. He only cares about his varsity team, which he's already trialed players for. He's kind of auditioned players to get on this team, and some of them have.
Yeah, he has no intention of taking any other players from the farm team.
Yeah.
He's got the good players, he thinks.
Yeah, and I think the farm team is actually, they're using the junior high field or something like that. They're way out.
Sometimes they are when it's available.
Yes.
But otherwise they have a little space that's not even really big enough to play baseball.
That's right, yes. Yeah, not big enough. And
they are working with the old coach, who's been kind of shoved aside for this new guy, Coach Daimon.
Yeah.
And
that's I think that's a sports manga trope too, is the old timer coach. It comes in, because we had it in ping pong as well, so I bet you it's in a lot of sports manga.
Okay. So did you notice how I keep forgetting his name, Adachi. Did you notice how Adachi uses repetition of lines.
Yeah.
Like the thing about the clover that he opens with, that comes up several times, and including after Wakaba's death, and the part about 4-leaf clovers are good luck has a whole different feeling then. Or another one that was repeated, there were several, but that look in her eyes, it's the look my ma has when she sees a cockroach. And then the second time it comes up, it's talking about Aoba, and it's the look she has when she crushes a cockroach.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for some of those, like, emotional lines, probably hits a bit different if you're reading it week to week as opposed to in one volume. But it does, I mean, a lot of those are lines from Wakaba, who's passed away, right? And they're like resounding in people's memories. So they do have a kind of weight to them. But it's also the repetition of places, like the location shots. There's always a setup shot of now we're at the batting center, now we're at the cafe or whatever. We always get an exterior shot, so we know exactly where we are. The pace is slowed right down for these scenes, in contrast to the baseball scenes, which are really dynamic and fast-paced. All the kind of pastoral kind of living in the countryside stuff goes pretty slow. There's a lot of silent panels in it, like lots of silent panels.
A whole
clouds,
5 or 10 pages in a row.
So many panels sometimes. Of clouds. The clouds over the store or something like that, you know? Really interesting in terms of the pacing, because he seems to know how to amp up, because it really amps up the baseball scenes, right? And by the way, the baseball scenes are fascinating to me. Like when sometimes you see the bat hit the ball, he does it different every time. He doesn't go to one trick, but one thing I noticed he does a couple times is he'll show the actual impact with the ball, and the ball will be like squished against the bat. So you're looking at like a real kind of moment that I don't even know if you could photograph. I guess you could with a super high-speed camera, but it's a really kind of incredible thing. And then sometimes you'll have the ball flying through the air. Most of the times when the ball's in flight, well, not most of the time, it'll be like oblong. It'll be like oval-shaped. So you can get a sense of like how it's moving through the air. But sometimes it'll be a perfect ball, which means, it's kind of a lob that's kind of moving a lot slower. It was fascinating to me, all his approaches to try to keep this interesting.
Well, and then when there's a really strongly thrown pitch by Aoba or Ko, and it hits the catcher's mitt with this whomp, and it's so satisfying.
Yes.
Because so-and-so has swung and missed, and it's somebody that you want to see swing and miss.
Yes. Yeah, so
or just the feeling like wow, he or she is a really good pitcher.
Yes, you really get a sense of the speed. You get a sense of how hard she is throwing the ball, or how hard Ko is batting it. It's really fascinating to me, and he's able to pull it off. That you really get a sense of how powerful it is, and I guess it's also the emotions of the players are tied up with it too, because we get some of and we get the commentary from other people who are watching them. There's a lot going on here. I really don't know how it works, but I'm riveted by it. I've been trying to figure it out. I've read it, like I said, many times, and it's like he doesn't stick to the same method of showing how the bat hits the ball. It's something different every time. There's sometimes when somebody's pitching, I noticed there's a couple of panels where somebody's about to throw a super pitch, and he doesn't draw the ball in their hand. You just see empty fingers. I'm like, that is such an interesting choice, because it's obviously not what the people in the scene are looking at, but you are focused on the body language, or not the body language, but the body technique of a person who's throwing a ball or batting or something like that, to just take the ball out of the equation. It's all like mental and physical. It's really interesting.
I was a little... Maybe this is intentional. I was a little annoyed by his writing style sometimes, because again and again, he sets you up with this like mysterious comment or lingering question that somebody asks, and then he changes scenes and it takes like 5 or 10 pages to get back. It's like, well, now what was it I was waiting for here?
Yeah.
I kind of forgot now. But yeah, I was like, no, just answer the question. Tell us what the answer was. Don't change scenes.
Yes, he does do that a couple of times. Yeah, for sure. Okay, meanwhile, was there anything? Okay, so we've set up. There's basically a rivalry between the varsity team and the portables team, even though they're at the same school. But the goal of the portables team is to get, or the varsity team is to get to Koshien.
Yeah.
But 3 players did not try out for the varsity team, and that's Ko, Akaishi, and Nakanishi.
Yeah, Nakanishi.
Yeah, so those 2 are kind of like Babe Ruth types. They're like big, bulky guys. They're apparently the toughest guys in school, we're told a couple of times.
Uh-huh.
There has been some sort of violent incident, which I think is not unpacked until a later volume, as I recall. There was some kind of fight in a locker room. This is another thing that's hanging over the series.
Well, yeah, there's something about how Ko had thought about joining the baseball team, and then, like, Nakanishi beat him up, but
beat somebody up. I don't think it was him. It has something to do with
explained.
It has to do something to do with the guys that have already gone up to high school. It has something to do with some high school kids. Yeah, it's
the scumbags, right?
The scumbags. That's not answered yet at this point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. By the way, there's so many players here. Like, by players, I didn't mean that as a pun. There's so many characters. Because once he goes up into the junior high school range, we're introduced to some new characters, including this kid Senda, who wants to be, who breaks the fourth wall all the time, saying how he wants to be a main character, essentially.
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious and unexpected after Alba's death. Like, what's all this comedy? What's all this fourth wall breaking?
Yeah. There was a little bit beforehand, too, where Adachi would constantly promote Shonen Sunday magazine or Touch or other stuff like that. Yeah.
Or the first trade paperback.
Yes. Yes.
And his dad, Ko, is saying, holding up a sign for the first trade, and his dad's like, oh, you're doing a plug, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. But we get these ringers that come in. One of them, especially this guy, Yuhei, seems to be pretty important. He's got the really thick eyebrows. That guy seems like he's going to be important. We also get the team managers. So the interim principal's daughter becomes the manager for the varsity team, but she doesn't seem to care about her job managing the team. She is waiting for the media to show up so she can become famous.
Yeah, and she's really cute. So she probably would become famous.
Yes. She's cute, but she's very cold. Like, she's kind of cold-shoulder-ish, I guess, standoffish. Meanwhile, the manager for the farm team is this girl that's kind of like a little bit overweight, but is really like keen to like clean the balls and things like that. And there's also a mysterious old drunk guy that seems to hang around the liquor store.
And has a chauffeur.
Mysteriously. We think he's just some old drunk that hangs around and talks about baseball at the liquor store. He's getting all this information from Akaishi about how the baseball team is doing and stuff like this. We don't know who this guy is, but then the last time we see him in this omnibus, he's driving off with the chauffeur. So that's going to be he's going to be some mysterious benefactor.
Yeah, I mean, I was expecting a drunk driving thing there because he's got booze, but then he gets in the back seat and he's talking with the driver.
And the driver says, yes, sir, I'll take you there, sir. He says, take me to see my granddaughter. He says, yes, sir.
Yeah, it's not a taxi. It's a limo.
No. Yeah, so that's going to be, you can see that's going to turn into something else.
Sometimes Adachi's writing style, it's so subtle that I had to think about what is happening in the scene.
Yep.
So they're trying to hide the fact that Ko is practicing.
Yes, that's right.
And
he's training.
It took a while for me to realize that was what the deal was in the scene, because he's pitching and Yuhei Azuma is coming, one of the ringers.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh no, it's Azuma. And then, so somebody knocks over the chalk thing that, you pull along with the wheels on it to chalk the lines. And somebody knocks it over, so there's a big cloud of chalk. Yes. And I guess it blocks Azuma's view of Ko pitching.
Yeah.
But it's not really explained in the dialogue, and it took me. I had to stare at it and think about it.
At one point, Senda walks past them and sees them training, and he's like, "What are they doing?" And then later on, Senda says something about how we learned that they told him that Ko is training for boxing. And they're like, oh, there must be some popular boxing manga, and that's why he's doing this now. So, yeah, there's some lines of dialogue, but you definitely have to put it together. That's right. There's not really any hand-holding about what's actually happening in some scenes. You've got to kind of... It's like you said, it's kind of like asking a question and giving the answer later. You see these scenes happen, and then it's not until later that somebody talks about, well, is there some popular boxing manga? Why is Ko jogging like that every day? You know, it doesn't come up until a bit later, and then you start to put the pieces together that they've got this scam going so that they can train in secret in the woods and do their pitching training and all that kind of stuff, too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The only other thing I had in my notes, I guess this is just how stories work, but I felt like this is basically a sports manga with the tragedy added at the beginning to kind of give it more weight.
Yes.
And, like, if you don't have the tragedy, the manga is a lot less interesting.
Yes, that's true.
And so I kind of felt like, I'm being manipulated here. That's true. What stories are, I guess.
Yeah, it's 100%. It's kind of manipulative, but again, it's not really... It's just a feeling that kind of hangs over the whole series where you're kind of remembering her and her wishes for Ko. But the other thing about this that's interesting to me is that it's not just a sports manga because there's something going on. You can sense that there's a Ko-Aoba relationship that's got to form here because she's so annoyed by him, right? Uh-huh. You feel like this has to come in some way. There's going to be some triangles happening. There's a lot of volumes of this stuff, and it's as based on the first volume. I mean, you can tell it's not really about the baseball. There's not a lot of literally inside baseball kind of stuff here about, if I bat, like, a lot of sports manga, you have a lot of thought balloons or captions, narrative captions saying, I have to move my arm down 3 millimeters so that when the pitch comes in, I can hit it this hard and it'll go over. It'll like all that kind. There's none of that. Not at all. It's all just about the feeling. There's some, like I talked about the drawings of the baseball scenes, but there's one in particular I remember where the bat was it just looked like a wedge shape because it was swinging, and the ball was also like a weird kind of tube shape because it was flying. It's a weird, like, abstract moment, but that's like, there's not a lot of talk, even from people offside, about what this person needs to do to hit this ball or something like that. It's all presented in a way that's very easy to understand for anybody, even if they don't know anything about baseball, I feel. Might help you to know a little bit about the bases and runs and innings, a little bit, very basic information, but otherwise you don't need it. So I don't think, the manipulation is there, but I think the reason I love this series is there's so much emotionally going on with the characters and all the way that different characters relate to each other. Like, even Ko even has a relationship with the kindergartner Momiji because they play catch together all the time, and you know how she feels about him. By the way, there's a bunch of panels of a cute cat just having cat stuff.
Very, very cartoony cat. Very
cartoony cat. It's just there for kicks. And to help pacing, like, I feel like sometimes the cat's on a page to slow down the tempo before you get to the next page. It's almost like a placeholder. Let's look at this cat that's also wandering around in this scene or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the Tsukishima family's cat, right?
Yeah. So all that kind of and there's so much going on. I mean, Senda has this kind of crush on Aoba, I think, and he's like set up a date with her that he believes is happening, but he hasn't even like gotten a yes from her. She has no idea who he is.
Yeah, she doesn't even remember him calling her.
There's all this kind of stuff happening. Senda's on the varsity team. I think he's one of the only grade teams that made it up there.
One of the few who was recruited from who were already there before the ringers were brought in.
Yeah. I think that maybe the most like cartoonish character in terms of personality is maybe the interim principal, because there's a moment where the new coach, the killer shark coach, is like, yeah, I'm going to make them do this and this. He's being really cruel to the certain students, I think probably the farm team in some way. And the interim principal is like, bullying the weak. I love it.
Yeah.
So that's maybe
So I read that and I'm like, okay, I know how I'm supposed to root against here.
Yes. So I'm kind of like, okay, this is a really pretty cartoonish kind of character, but all the other relationships I'm really like invested in Ko and Alba and that whole family, all the daughters. I think everybody, even the really minor characters, are like, Ichio is in very few panels, but she's really interesting. But it's interesting because even her, like, there's one scene where she's not working in the cafe. Somebody comes in and orders a spaghetti and a coffee from Alba. And he's like, oh, is Ichio not here today? And she's like, no, she's got time off. And he's like, okay, cancel the spaghetti. And then you learn stuff about her. Oh, like, she's the good cook. And Alba's like the bad cook. Like,
yeah, somebody else comes in not knowing and orders the same spaghetti dish. And then when he gets it, like, what is this?
Yes.
And the guy who canceled his order is laughing.
Yes. So you pick up these little moments. There's such focus on these tiny little... This isn't a baseball manga, by the way, all the spaghetti talk. There's this focus on these weird little interpersonal moments that are like charming. This comic is charming. I think that's the thing about it. Yeah. So I mean, I didn't have many more notes too, despite it being like 600 pages of stuff, because a lot of it is looking at clouds, looking at baseballs.
Yeah, it reads fast.
Yeah, it reads very fast, but for me, it's a real joy. I'm glad we finally got around to it. This is my revenge for Berserk, kind of, is finally getting these volumes on here.
Well, you mentioned getting invested in this. So the first time I read Alba's death, I was like, I'm supposed to cry. This is just a manga. This is just a manga. It's just a manga. Yeah. The second time, after I read the whole volume once, second time it really got me.
Yeah.
Because now I had some investment in it, and I knew the characters better, and then I didn't care if it was just a manga or not.
Yeah. Yeah, cool.
Cross Game by Mitsuru Adachi is published by Viz Media. Thanks to our patrons for supporting Deconstructing Comics and our other podcasts. To join them, go to patreon.com/deconcomics. Patrons get access to podcasts about the early years of The Amazing Spider-Man, Jim Starlin's run on Captain Marvel, and more. Check out our Facebook group. A number of other people, including Kumar, share interesting links there. You can find the link to Discussion Group Facebook at deconstructingcomics.com in the left sidebar, as well as our Facebook page and our X and YouTube accounts. From our site, you can also follow the link to shop at Amazon to support the show, find links to subscribe to the podcast, leave a comment on any episode on our site, or leave us a voicemail. You can also write to us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. Are you making a comic? Send it to us and we'll do a Critiquing Comics episode about it. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. Next week, Emmett and I continue our discussion of Jack Kirby's Eternals, looking at issues 5 through 8. This book is wacky in a way that the MCU movie just wasn't. So until next week, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.